Hello everyone, and welcome to this video about workshop ideas for conferences. I've attended a few conferences throughout the country in the past couple years, and usually it's to give workshops for trainees on their professional development, and usually graduate students, but postdocs as well. So here are some ideas for you if you are deciding to showcase professional development during your scientific conference. The optimal trainee session is actually a 3-hour workshop that I have delivered at various conferences throughout the country. A 3-hour workshop entails 1 hour on each of these topics. 1 hour on reflection, 1 hour on meaningful engagement, and 1 hour on marketing yourself or storytelling. And I highlight the CAR statements on resumes. The reason why I highlight CAR statements is because it helps students engage in more meaningful experiences throughout their graduate school and beyond, because they're trying to figure out, well, why am I doing this, and what am I doing, and what was the result of those actions? So usually in a 3-hour conference, the first hour, the reflection, I give either one of two exercises. One is they go fill out the individual development plan before they even show up for the workshop, and then everyone gives peer feedback. And they pick one of those skills, or students pick out one of those skills that they want to work on. They come up with a plan. And with each other's peer feedback from the group, the peers give them feedback on, well, if you want to work on publications or if you want to work on communications, here are some resources on campus for you. And after this peer feedback process, I ask, are there any questions, or are there any things that came up that you did not know the answers to, or where the resources are? And if there are some sort of those type of ideas, I give my personal feedback. The other reflection exercise is in the classroom or in the workshop. I ask, what are some of the core competency skills that students need to succeed in graduate school and beyond? And then the students get into teams of 3 or 4, and they try to come up with these skills. And then at the end of their thinking session, we put all these skills on the board. So the whole room came up with these core competency skills. And then I ask, well, how do these skills compare to what the industry is looking for? And in my previous video of the core competency skills that are out there, we compare those two lists. And then we discuss why they couldn't think of some other skills. It could have been empowering others, or flexibility, or managing others. The second hour on meaningful engagement, I do several things that's possible. One, you can do the brainstorming exercise where each team comes up with some sort of meaningful engagement for each team member. And that seems to be a popular one. Another exercise that you can also do is coming up with after they filled out the individual development plan, coming up with their potential career pathway. And then we set up hubs around the room, and each of those hubs, the students that are the team members are going to come up with, here's a potential pathway to academia, here's a potential pathway to an MSL, potential pathway to management consulting, and et cetera, et cetera. And by the end of the hour, we have these potential pathways all outlined, and everyone could go and view these pathways. The third hour about CARs, some exercises you can do with that is introduce the CAR statement before the conference, and then they bring in a sample resume that they have. And then I use that hour to give feedback on these CAR statements as a group, or from peer to peer. So it's a think, pair, share with 2 people. But I also put up on the board my feedback on a particular resume, so they can give each other feedback that's effective for each other. Now, if you do not have 3 hours to give a professional development workshop, I would recommend stating those 3 highlights in that 1 hour, but you cannot do all the exercises, obviously. So you have to choose, and one way some conferences have done this is they'll poll the students beforehand on what would you like to do in that hour that we have. But touch on all three of these subjects and then go through one exercise in that 1 hour. If you have a conference workshop where you can meet throughout the conference, this is what I would recommend. Okay? So let's say it's a large conference and you have several days where the students are there. Before the conference begins, have a information session on effective networking. What is an informational interview? And you can do this through a video, or you can get them, have them meet together before the conference starts and talk about how to network effectively throughout the next 4 or 5 days. How do you request an informational interview with professionals that are attending the conference for the next 4 or 5 days? So then during the conference, these students are taught how to make that outreach, and they set up an informational interview, maybe over breakfast or during a coffee break. And then after the conference, there's a post-conference debrief. So all the students come together and they share the informational interviews that they carried out during the conference. The more optimal situation is if the students are given this information months in advance, so then they can contact their favorite informational interview potential mentor before the conference even starts. So maybe 3 months in advance, so that they can set up their informational interview during the conference, but you still have your debrief with all the students post the conference. And that way the students have a more enriching experience throughout the conference as they go and meet the people that they want to meet. And then they learn from each other with the post-conference debrief on who they met, who they talked to, what they learned, and what their next steps are. And then during the post-conference debrief, you might want to match them up with what I call a trio system or even a duo system, where they're matched with some buddies. So then their next steps, they have a buddy to talk to wherever they are. So the whole conference, if you are organizing a whole conference, either whether it be scientific or around professional development, what I have found throughout most of my conference journeys are that you go, you listen to a talk, or you go, you listen to a talk, you look at some posters, and then you have all this wealth of information, and then you come back home, and you might have one takeaway, or maybe 2 takeaways at most that you're going to implement into your teachings or into your work. And I find that many of the information that you've gathered over the course of the 3 or 4 or 5 days seems to get kind of lost in your notes. So what I would recommend for conference organizers is, if you have the ability to do this, is before the even conference starts, ask your attendees, what do you hope to gain from this conference, and what are the challenges that you are facing? What are the challenges that you are facing in your workplace right now, or with your work or with your science, that you hope to address while you're here? And that way, when they come to the conference, you can set up sort of before the conference even begins, like a thinking hub, where, let's say, for example, I was at a higher ed conference, and one of the issues that people had challenges were with, let's say, engagement with either students or postdocs or faculty or industry partners. And if that's a challenge that they want to tackle, then before the conference, they get together with all the people that thought that was their challenge, and they come up with ideas. How can we address this? And then throughout the conference, they go to each of these sessions, and while they're taking notes for other things that they're interested in, is they're coming up with ideas to add on top of the ideas that come up with their group. So throughout the whole conference, they're going to take in notes about tips on dealing with engagement. Then after the conference, there's a debrief again, where you all meet again, and then you come up with sort of a plan to go forth with all the ideas you've collected throughout the conference with your group. So now everyone has a plan going forward how that they could tackle this problem or challenge they had with engagement. I would like to use the power of everyone that's attending the conference to come up with solutions. And hopefully next time at your next conference, you could incorporate some of these ideas so that people go away with concrete takeaways and some sort of accountability with part of their team that they worked on throughout the conference. Thanks.